Chapter 12. Pip fidgeted nervously under the table, hoping Kara was too busy talking to notice. It was the first time that Pip had ever had to keep things from her, and the nerves kicked around in her stomach. They'd made it through the third day back at school, when teachers stopped talking about what they were going to teach and actually started teaching. Pip and Kara were in the Word's kitchen, pretending to do homework, but really, Kara was unspooling into an existential crisis. And I told him I still have no clue which college I want to go to. And he's all, "Time's ticking, Kara, and it's stressing me out. Have you decided yet?" "Yeah, a few days ago," Pip said. "You are the worst person to vent about life plans," Kara snorted. "I bet you already know what you want to do when you're a big girl, too. Go on, tell me. Where are you applying?" "Columbia. Going early decision, hopefully." "Your efficiency offends me." Pip's phone buzzed on the table. "Who's that?" Kara asked. "It's just Ravi Singh," Pip said, scanning the texts, seeing if I have any more updates. "Oh, we're texting each other now, are we?" Kara said playfully. "Should I be saving a date next week for the wedding?" Pip threw a pen at her. How ridiculous. They were just working together, that was all. "Well, do you have any Andy Bell updates?" Kara said. "No," Pip said. "Absolutely nothing new." The lie made the knot in her gut squeeze tighter. Aunt and Connor were still denying they put the note in her sleeping bag when she'd asked at school. They suggested maybe it was Zach or one of the girls. Of course, their denial wasn't solid proof it hadn't been them. But Pip had to consider the other possibility. What if? What if it was actually someone involved in the Andy Bell case trying to scare her into giving up the project? Someone who had a lot to lose if she kept going. She told no one about the note. Not the girls, not the boys when they asked what it said, not her parents, not even Ravi. Their concern might stop her project dead in its tracks, and she couldn't risk that. She had to keep this secret close to her chest, and she would learn from the master, Miss Andy Bell. "Where's your dad?" asked Pip. "Dude, he came in like 15 minutes ago to say he was off tutoring." "Oh, right," Pip said. Secrets were distracting. Mr. Ward had always tutored 3 times a week. It was part of the Ward routine, which Pip knew by heart. Her nerves were making her sloppy. Kara would notice she was hiding something. She knew Pip too well. She had to calm down. She was here for a reason. Being skittish would only get her caught. She could hear the buzz and thud of the television in the other room. Naomi was watching some crime drama that involved a lot of pew-pewing guns. Now was the perfect moment to act. "Hey, can I borrow your laptop for 2 secs?" she asked Kara, relaxing her face so it wouldn't betray her. "Just want to look up this book for English." "Yep, sure," Kara said, passing it across. "Don't close my tabs." "Won't," Pip said, turning the laptop so Kara couldn't see the screen. Pip's heartbeat picked up. There was so much blood behind her face, she must be turning red. She leaned down to hide behind the screen and clicked up the control panel. She'd been up until 3 last night, the note haunting her when she closed her eyes. So she did some research, trawling through the internet, looking at badly worded instruction manuals for wireless printers. Anyone could have followed her there into the woods, that was clear. Anyone could have watched her, lured her and her friends out of the canopy so they could leave their message. But there was only one name on her persons of interest list who would have known exactly where Pip and Kara were camping: Naomi. Pip had been stupid to discount her because of the Naomi she thought she knew. There could well be another Naomi, one who might or might not be lying about leaving Max's for a period of time the night Andy died. One who might or might not have been in love with Sal. One who might or might not have hated Andy enough to kill her. After hours of reading, Pip had learned there was no way to see the previous documents a wireless printer had printed. And no one in their right mind would save a threatening note like that on their computer, so attempting to look through Naomi's documents would be pointless. But there was something else she could do. With the steps memorized from a how-to webpage, Pip opened up the devices and printer setting on Kara's laptop and hovered the mouse over the name of the Ward family printer, Freddie Prince Jr. She right-clicked into Printer Properties and onto the Advanced tab, checked the box next to Keep Printed Documents, clicked Apply, and it was done. She closed down the panel and navigated back to Kara's homework. "Thanks," she said, passing the laptop over. certain that her heart was loud enough to hear. No problemo. Kara's laptop would now keep track of everything that came through their printer. If Pip received another printed message, she could find out for sure if it had come from Naomi or not. The kitchen door opened with an explosion from the White House and screaming federal agents. Naomi stood in the doorframe. God, Nay, Kara said. We're working in here. Can you turn it down? Sorry, she whispered, as though it compensated for the loud TV. Just getting a drink. You okay, Pip? Naomi looked at her with a puzzled expression, and Pip realized she had been staring first. Oh, yep, just made me jump, she said, her smile just a little too wide, carving uncomfortably into her cheeks. Pippa Fitzamobi, 9/6/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 13. Transcript of second interview with Emma Hutton. Thanks for agreeing to talk again. This is a really short follow-up, I promise. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks. Okay, so I've been asking around about Andy, and I've heard a rumor I wanted to run by you. That Andy might have been seeing someone at the same time as Sal. An older guy, maybe? Did you ever hear anything like that? Who told you that? Sorry, they asked to say anonymous. Was it Chloe Birch? Again, sorry, they asked me not to say. It had to be her. We were the only ones who knew. So it's true? Andy was seeing an older man during her relationship with Sal? Well, yeah, that's what she said. She never told us his name or anything, though. Did you have any idea how long it'd been going on? Like, not long at all before she went missing. I think she started talking about it in March. That's just a guess. And you knew nothing about who it was? No, she liked teasing us that we didn't know. And did you mention it to the police? No, because honestly, those are the only details we ever knew. And I thought maybe Andy had made him up for some drama. But after the whole Sal thing happened, didn't you think it might be relevant? A possible motive? No, 'cause I wasn't convinced he was real. And Andy wasn't stupid. She wouldn't have told Sal about him. But what if Sal found out? I don't think so. Andy was good at keeping secrets. Okay, final question, I promise. I was wondering if you knew whether Andy ever had a falling out with Naomi Ward. Naomi Ward? Sal's friend? Yeah. Not to my knowledge, but she was Sal's friend, not Andy's. I know, but did Andy ever mention any tension with Naomi or say bad things about her? No, but now that you mention it, she definitely was hating on one of the Wards. It just wasn't Naomi. What do you mean? You know Mr. Ward, the history teacher? I don't know if he's still at Fairview, but yeah, Andy did not like him. I remember her referring to him as an asshole, among other less delicate words. Why? When was this? I couldn't say specifically, but I think it was around that spring break. So not long before everything happened. But Andy wasn't taking history with him? No, it must have been something like he told her that her skirt was too short for school. She always hated that. Okay, thanks again for all your help, Emma. No worries, bye. No, just no. First, Naomi, who I can't even look in the eye anymore, and now Mr. Ward? Why are questions about Andy Bell returning answers about the people close to me? Okay, Andy insulting a teacher to her friends in the lead up to her death could be a coincidence. Entirely innocent. But, and it's a big but, Mr. Ward told me he hardly knew Andy or had anything to do with her in the last 2 years of her life. So why did she call him an asshole if they had nothing to do with each other? Was he lying? And if so, why? Even though it physically pains me to think this, could this innocuous clue indicate that Elliot Ward was the secret older man? I mean, I first thought the secret older guy would be in his 20s, but maybe my instincts were wrong. Maybe it refers to someone much older. Andy told her friends she could ruin this man. I thought this meant that the guy, whoever he was married. Mr. Ward wasn't married at the time. His wife had died a couple of years before, but he was a teacher in a position of trust. If there was an inappropriate relationship, Mr. Ward could have faced jail time. That certainly can be classified as ruining someone. Is he the type of person who would do that? No, he isn't. And is he the kind of man a beautiful 17-year-old would lust after? I just don't think so. I should grit my teeth and ask Mr. Ward. That's what I should do. Get some actual answers. Otherwise, I may end up suspecting everybody I know who may have spoken to Andy at some point in their lives. But how do you casually ask a grown man you've known since you were 6 why they lied about a murdered girl? Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Elliot Ward. Chapter 13. Mr. Ward was at the front of the classroom, reading out a passage from the Russian history textbook. He swiped something from the board, and Pip watched as a crack of sunlight climbed up the back of his bright shirt. She waited. When the bell finally rang for lunch, Mr. Ward called over the scraping chairs. Read Chapter 3 before next class, and if you want to get ahead, Trotsky on over to Chapter 4 as well. He chuckled at his own joke. You coming, Pip? Connor said, swinging his backpack onto one shoulder. Yeah, I'll come find you guys in a minute, she said. I need to ask Mr. Ward something first. You need to ask Mr. Ward something, huh? Mr. Ward had overheard. That's ominous. I hope you haven't started thinking about the coursework already. No, well, yes, I have, Pip said, but that's not what I want to ask you. She waited until they were the only two left in the classroom. What is it? Mr. Ward glanced down at his watch. You have 10 of my minutes before I start panicking about the panini queue. Yeah, sorry, Pip said, grasping inside for her courage. Everything okay? Mr. Ward asked, sitting back on his desk, arms and legs crossed. Worrying about your application? I don't think you need to worry. I've already started on your letter of recommendation and... No, thanks, but it's not that. She took a breath and blew out her top lip. When I interviewed you before, you said you didn't have anything to do with Andy in the last 2 years of school. Yes, correct, he blinked. She wasn't in any of my classes after sophomore year. Okay, but... Her courage returned all at once, and our words raced each other out. One of Andy's friends said that, excuse the language, Andy referred to you as an asshole and other unsavory words sometime in the weeks before she went missing. The why was hiding there beneath her words. She didn't need to say it. Oh, Mr. Ward said, rubbing the dark hair back from his face. He looked at her and sighed. Well, I was hoping this wouldn't come up. I don't see what good it can do to dwell on it now. But I can see you're being very thorough with your project. Pip nodded, her silence beckoning an answer. Mr. Ward shifted. I don't feel too comfortable about it, saying unpleasant things about a student who has lost her life. He glanced up at the classroom door and scooted over to shut it. I didn't have much to do with Andy at school, but as Naomi's dad, I knew her, of course, and it was in that capacity, through Naomi, that I learned some things about Andy. Yes? No easy way of saying it, but she was a bully. She was bullying another girl in their grade. I can't remember her name now. There was some sort of incident, a video that Andy had posted online. Pip was both surprised and not really at all. Yet another secret in Andy Bell's life. I knew enough to understand that Andy would be in trouble with both the school and the police for what she'd done, Mr. Ward continued. And I thought it was a shame because it was the first week back after spring break and exams were coming up. He sighed again. What I should have done, when I found out, was tell the principal about the incident. But the school has a no-tolerance policy on bullying, and I knew Andy would be expelled immediately. I just couldn't do it. Even though she was a bully, I couldn't live with myself knowing I'd play a part in ruining a student's future. So what did you do? Pip asked. I looked up her father's contact details and I called him, the first day of school after the break. You mean the Monday of the week Andy disappeared? Mr. Ward nodded. Yes, I guess it was. I called Jason Bell and I told him everything I'd learned and said that he needed to have a very serious talk with his daughter about bullying and consequences, and I suggested restricting her online access. I said I was trusting him to sort it out, otherwise I would have no choice but to inform the school and have Andy expelled. And what did he say? Well, he was thankful that I was giving his daughter a second chance she possibly didn't deserve, and he promised he would talk to her. I'm guessing now that when Jason did speak to Andy, he mentioned that I was the source of the information. So if I was the target of some choice words from Andy that week, I'm not entirely surprised, I must say. Disappointed is all. Pip sighed with undisguised relief. What's that for? I'm just glad you weren't lying for a worse reason. Think you've read too many mystery novels, Pip. Why not some historical biographies instead? He smiled gently. They can be just as disturbing. She paused. You'd never told anyone before, had you, about Andy's bullying? Of course not. It seemed pointless after everything happened. Insensitive, too. He scratched his chin. I try not to think about it because I get lost in butterfly effect theories. What if I had just told the school and Andy was expelled that week? Would it have changed the outcome? Would the conditions that led to Sal killing her not have been in place? Would those two still be alive? I understand, Pip said. And you don't remember the girl Andy bullied? No, sorry, he said. Naomi would remember. You could ask her about it. Not sure what this has to do with the use of media in criminal investigations, though. He raised his eyebrows in a scolding way. Well, I haven't decided on my final title yet. Okay, well, don't go falling down a rabbit hole. He smiled, wagged his finger. And now I'm running away from you because I'm desperate for a tuna melt. He dashed into the corridor, and Pip felt lighter watching him go. That wasn't as hard as she thought it would be. And now she had some answers, another real lead to follow, and one less name on her list. But the lead was taking her back to Naomi, and Pip would have to look her in the eyes again, like she didn't think there was something secret hiding there. Pippa Fitzamobi, 9/12/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 15. Transcript of second interview with Naomi Ward. Okay, recording. Your dad told me that he found out Andy was bullying another girl in your year. Cyberbullying. He thought there was some online video involved. Do you know anything about this? Yeah, like I said, I thought Andy was bad news. Can you tell me more about it? There was a girl in our grade, Natalie De Silva, and she was pretty and blonde too. They looked quite similar, actually. And I guess Andy felt threatened by her, because at the start of our senior year, Andy started spreading rumors about her and finding ways to humiliate her. If Sal and Andy didn't start seeing each other until that December, how did you know all this? I was friends with Nat. We had biology together. Oh, what kind of rumors was Andy starting? The kind of disgusting things only a teenage girl could think up. Things like her family was incestuous, that Nat watched people undress in the changing rooms and touched herself, those kinds of things. You think Andy did that because Nat was pretty and she felt threatened by her? I actually think that was the extent of her thought process. Andy wanted to be the girl everyone wanted. Nat was competition, so Andy had to take her down. Did you know about this video at the time? Yeah, it got shared all over social media. It wasn't taken down until a few days later when someone reported it. When was this? During spring break. So what was the video? As far as I know, Andy had been hanging out with some friends from school, including her two minions. Chloe Birch and Emma Hutton? Yeah, and some other kids. Not Sal or Nat or any of us. And there was this guy, Chris Parks, who everyone knew Nat liked. I don't know all the details, but Andy either used his phone or told him what to do, and they were sending flirty texts to Nat. And Nat was responding because she liked Chris and thought it was him. And then Andy/Chris asked Nat to send a video of her topless with her face in it so he'd know it was really her. And Nat did it? Yeah, a little naive, but she thought she was talking to just Chris. The next thing we all knew, the video was online and Andy and loads of other people were sharing it. The comments were so horrible. And practically everyone at school saw it before it got taken down. Nat was inconsolable. She even skipped the first 2 days back at school after break because she was so humiliated. Did Sal know Andy was behind it? Well, I mentioned it to him. He didn't approve, obviously, but he just said, "It's Andy's drama. I don't want to get involved." Sal was just too laid back about some things. Was there anything else that happened between Nat and Andy? Yeah, actually. I might have been the only one Nat told because she was crying in biology right after it happened. What? During that fall semester, the school was putting on a play, The Crucible, I think. Nat got the main part. Apparently, Andy had wanted it, and she was really pissed off. So after the parts were posted, Andy cornered Nat and she told her, "Yes?" Sorry, I forgot to mention some context. Nat's brother, Daniel, who was like 5 years older than us, he had worked at the school part-time as a janitor when we were like 15 or 16. Only for a year while he was looking for other jobs. Okay, so Andy cornered Nat and told her that when Daniel was still working at the school, he had sex with Andy, even though she was only 15 at the time. Andy told Nat to drop out of the play or she'd go to the police, and say she was statutorily raped by Nat's brother. So Nat dropped out because she was scared of what Andy would do. Was it true? Did Andy have a relationship with Nat's brother? I don't know. Nat didn't know for sure either. That's why she dropped out of the play, but I don't think she ever asked him. Do you know where Nat is now? Do you think I could talk to her? I'm not really in contact with her, but I know she's back at home with her parents. I heard some stuff about her, though. What stuff? I think in college she was involved in some kind of fight. She got arrested and charged with assault. I think she spent some time in prison. Oh God. I know. Can you give me her number? Chapter 14. Did you get all dressed up to come and see me, Sarge? Ravi said, leaning against his front door frame in a green plaid flannel shirt and jeans. Well, Pip had put on her nice jacket today. Not that she was going to tell him that. Nope, I came straight from school. But he was still smiling, eyes glinting like he knew something she didn't. If anything, I dressed down, Pip added. Ah, I see, he said. A plainclothes officer today. Exactly, she said. Speaking of, you're coming with me. Put some shoes on. She clapped her hands. Are we going on a mission? Ravi asked, falling back to slip on some old sneakers discarded in the hallway. Do I need to bring my night vision goggles and utility belt? Not this time. She smiled, starting down the garden path as Ravi closed the front door, then followed her. Where are we going? To a house where 2 potential Andy killer suspects grew up, Pip said. One of them just got out of prison for aggravated assault. You're my backup, since we're going to speak to a potentially violent person of interest. Backup? He said, catching up to walk alongside her. You know, Pip said casually, so there's someone there to hear my screams for help. Wait, Pip. He closed his fingers around her arm and pulled them both to a stop. I don't want you doing something that's actually dangerous. Sal wouldn't have wanted that either. Oh, come on, she shrugged him off. Nothing gets between me and my homework, not even a little danger. He looked unconvinced. I'm kidding. I'm just going to very calmly ask her a few questions. Oh, it's a her? Ravi said. Okay then. Pip swung her backpack and whacked him on the elbow. Hey, she said. Women can be just as dangerous as men. Ouch, tell me about it, he said, rubbing his arm. What have you got in there, bricks? It sounded like Andy was a piece of work, Ravi said in the car when Pip was done catching him up on everything she'd learned since they last spoke. Everything except the dark figure in the forest and the note in her sleeping bag. This investigation meant everything to him, but she knew he would tell her to stop if he thought she was putting herself in danger. She couldn't let that happen. And yet, he carried on, it was so easy for everyone to believe Sal was the monster. Whoa, I'm so deep. He turned to her. You can quote me on that in your project. Of course, footnote and everything, she said. Ravi Singh, he said, drawing his words with his fingers. Deep, unfiltered thoughts. Pip's bug-faced car, 2019. Yes, she glanced quickly at him, except you didn't use proper referencing style. Oh, the shame, he pretended to wince. The mechanical voice on her phone's GPS interrupted, announcing they had reached their destination. Must be this one, Pip said. Naomi told me it was the one with the blue door. She pulled over to the curb. I called Natalie twice yesterday. The first time, she hung up after I said the words school project. The second time, she wouldn't pick up at all. Let's hope she'll actually open the door. You coming? I'm not sure, he said, pointing at his own face. There's that whole murderer's brother thing. You might get more answers if I'm not there. Oh. How about I stand on the path there? He gestured to the slabs of concrete that ran through the yard toward the house, to the point where they turned sharply left to lead to the front door. She won't see me, but I'll be right there, ready for action. They stepped out of the car, and Ravi handed over her backpack with an exaggerated grunt. She nodded at him when he was in position and then strolled up to the front door. She prodded the bell twice, fiddling nervously with the hem of her jacket as a shadowy figure emerged behind the frosted glass. The door opened slowly, and a face appeared in the crack, a young woman with white blonde hair cropped closely to her head and eyeliner ringed thickly around her eyes. Beneath the makeup, she looked eerily like Andy, similar big blue eyes and plump pale lips. Hi, Pip said. Are you Nat De Silva? Yes, she said hesitantly. My name's Pip. She swallowed. I was the one who called you yesterday. I'm friends with Naomi Ward. You knew her at school, right? Yeah, Naomi was a friend. Why? Is she okay? Nat looked concerned. Oh, she's fine, Pip smiled. She's back home at the moment. I didn't know she was back. Nat opened the door a little wider. Yeah, I should catch up with her sometime. So... Sorry for showing up like this, Pip said. She looked down at full-length Natalie, noticing the electronic tag buckled around her ankle. So, as I said when I called, I'm doing a school project, and I was wondering if I could ask you some questions. She looked quickly back up at Nat's face. What about? Nat shifted the tagged foot behind the door. It's about Andy Bell. No thanks. Nat stepped back to shut the door, but Pip blocked it with her foot. Please, I know the awful things she did to you, she said. I can understand why you wouldn't want to, but that bitch ruined my life, Nat spat. I'm not wasting one more breath on her. Move. That's when they both heard the sound of rubber skidding across concrete and a whispered, oh crap. Nat glanced up and her eyes widened. You, she said quietly. You're Sal's brother. It wasn't a question. Pip turned now, her eyes falling on Ravi behind her, standing sheepishly next to the uneven slab he must have tripped over. Hi, he said, ducking his head and raising his hand. I'm Ravi. He came to stand beside Pip, and Nat's grip on the door loosened. She let it swing open. Sal was always nice to me, she said, even when he didn't have to be. The last time I spoke to him, he was offering to give up his lunch breaks to tutor me in Gov because I was struggling. I'm sorry you don't have your brother anymore. Thank you, Ravi said. It must be hard for you too, Nat carried on, her eyes still lost in another world. How much this town worships Andy Bell. Fairview's saint and sweetheart. That bench dedication in the park, taken too soon. Not soon enough, it should say. She wasn't a saint, Pip said gently, trying to coax Nat out from behind the door. But Nat wasn't looking at her, only at Ravi. He stepped up. She bullied you? Sure did, Nat laughed bitterly. And she's still ruining my life, even from the grave. You've checked out my hardware. She pointed to her ankle monitor. Got this because I punched one of my suite mates in college. We were deciding on bedrooms, and this girl started pulling a stunt exactly like Andy would have, and I just lost it. We know about the video she put up of you, Pip said. She should have faced charges over it. You were still a minor at the time. Nat shrugged. At least she was punished in some way that week. Some divine providence. Thanks to Sal. Did you want her dead after what she'd done to you? Ravi asked. Of course I did, Nat said darkly. Of course I wanted her gone. I skipped 2 days of school because I was so upset. And when I went back on the Wednesday, everyone was looking at me, laughing at me. I was crying in the corridor, and Andy walked by and called me a slut. I was so angry that I left her a nice little note in her locker. I was too scared to ever say anything to her face, though. Pip glanced sideways at Ravi, at his tense jaw and furrowed brows, and she knew he'd picked up on it too. A note, he said? Was it a threatening note? No shit, Nat laughed. You stupid bitch, I'm going to kill you. Something like that. Sal got there first, though. Maybe he didn't, Pip said. Nat turned and looked Pip in the face. Then she burst into loud and forced laughter, a mist of spit landing on Pip's cheek. Oh, this is too good, she hooted. Are you asking me whether I killed Andy Bell? I had the motive, right? That's what you're thinking? You want my fucking alibi? She laughed cruelly. Pip didn't say anything. Her mouth was filling uncomfortably with saliva, but she didn't swallow. She didn't want to move at all. She felt Ravi brushing against her shoulder, his hand skimming just past hers, disturbing the air around it. Nat leaned toward them. I didn't have any friends left because of Andy Bell. I had no place to be on that Friday night. I was home playing Scrabble with my parents and sister-in-law, tucked in by 11. Sorry to disappoint you. And where was your brother, Pip said, if his wife was at home with you? He's a suspect too, is he? Her voice darkened. Naomi must have been talking then. He was out drinking with his cop friends that night. He's a police officer? Just finished his training that year. So yeah, no murderers in this house, I'm afraid. Now fuck off and tell Naomi to fuck off too. Nat stepped back and kicked the door shut in their faces. Pip watched the door vibrating in its frame, her eyes so transfixed that it looked for a moment like the very particles of air were rippling. She shook her head and turned to Ravi. "Let's go," he said softly. Back in the car, Pip allowed herself to just breathe for a few seconds, to arrange the haze of her thoughts into actual words. Ravi found his first. Am I in trouble for, literally tripping into the interrogation? I heard raised voices and... No. Pip looked at him and couldn't help but smile. We're lucky you did. She only talked because you were there. He sat up a little straighter in his seat, and his hair brushed against the roof of the car. So the death threat that journalist told you about came from Nat, Pip finished, turning the key in the ignition. She pulled out and drove about 20 feet up the road, out of sight of the De Silva house, before stopping again and reaching for her phone. What are you doing? Nat said her brother is a police officer. She thumbed on the browser app. Let's look him up. It came up on the first page of results, Daniel De Silva's LinkedIn profile. It said he was an officer at the Fairview Police Department, had been so since the end of 2013. Hey, I know him, Ravi said, leaning over her shoulder. You do? Yeah. Back when I started asking questions about Sal, he was the officer that told me to give it up, that my brother was guilty beyond doubt. He does not like me. Ravi's hand crept up to the back of his head, losing his fingers in his dark hair. Last summer, I was sitting at a table outside the cafe by the library. This guy, he gestured to the photo, made me move along, said I was loitering. Funny he didn't think anyone else was loitering, just the brown kid with a murderer for a brother. What an asshole, she said. And he shut down all your questions about Sal? Ravi nodded. He's been a police officer in Fairview since just before Andy disappeared. Pip stared down at her phone into Daniel's smiling face. Ravi, if someone did frame Sal and make his death look like suicide, wouldn't it be easier for someone with knowledge of police procedure? That it would, Sarge, he said. And there's the rumor Andy slept with him when she was 15, which he used to blackmail Nat out of the play. Yes, and what if they started up again later, after Daniel was married and Andy was a senior? He could be the secret older guy. What about Nat, he said. I sort of want to believe her when she says she was home with her parents that night because she'd lost all her friends. But she's also proven to be violent. He weighed up his hands in a conceptual seesaw. And there's obviously motive. Maybe a brother and sister killer tag team? Or a Nat and Naomi killer tag team, Pip groaned. She did seem pretty angry that Naomi had talked to you, Ravi agreed. What's the word count on this project, Pip? Not enough, Ravi. Not nearly enough. Should we just go and get ice cream and give our brains a rest? He turned to her with that smile of his. Pip was supposed to go to Lauren's house later, but she could be a little late. Just a little bit. Yes, we probably should. As long as you're a cookie dough kind of gal. Quote, Ravi Singh, he said dramatically into an invisible microphone. A thesis on the best ice cream flavor. Pip's car. Shut up. Okay. Pippa Fitz Amobi, 9/14/19. Capstone Project Log. Entry 17. I can't find anything on Daniel De Silva. There's hardly anything to learn from his Facebook profile, other than he got married in September 2013 and he really likes barbecues. There's nothing about his professional life online either, only an article written by Stanley Forbes 3 years ago about a car collision on Hillside that Daniel responded to. But if he was the secret older guy, Andy could have ruined him in two different ways. She could have told his new wife he was cheating and destroyed his marriage, or she could have filed a police report about statutory rape from 2 years before. Both circumstances are just rumor at this point, but if true, they certainly would give Daniel a motive for wanting her dead. Andy could have blackmailed him. It's definitely not out of character for her to have been blackmailing a De Silva. If Daniel is our killer, he might have disturbed the investigation somehow in his capacity as a police officer, a man on the inside. Perhaps when searching the Bell residence, he could have stolen or tampered with any evidence that would lead back to him, or his sister. It's also worth noting the way he reacted to Ravi asking questions about Sal. Did he shut Ravi down to protect himself? I've looked through all the reports on Andy's disappearance again. staring at pictures of the police searches until it feels like my eyes are about to climb out of their sockets. I found one photo that could be De Silva, taken on the Sunday morning. There's an officer walking through Andy's front door, his back, annoyingly, to the camera. But his hair color and length matched De Silva's when I cross-referenced social media photos from around that time. It could be him. On to the list he goes. Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Nat De Silva, Daniel De Silva. Pippa Fitzamobi, 9/17/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 18. It's here. The Connecticut State Police have responded to my FOI request. Dear Miss Fitzamobi, Freedom of Information Request reference number 3142/19. I write in connection with your request for information dated 8/19/19, received by the Connecticut State Police for the following information. I'm doing a project at school about the Andrea Bell investigation, and I would like to request the following. 1. A transcript of the interview conducted with Salil Singh on 4/19/14. 2. A transcript of any interviews conducted with Jason Bell. 3. Records of the findings from the searches of the Bell residence on 4/19/14 and 4/20/14. I would be very grateful if you could help with any of these requests. Result. Requests 2 and 3 have been refused, citing exemptions under Connecticut General Statutes 1-210b3, Records of Law Enforcement Agencies Not in the Public Interest, and Connecticut General Statutes 1-210b2, Files that constitute an invasion of privacy. This email serves as a partial refusal notice under the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act. Request 1 has been upheld, but the document contains redactions as per 1-210b3 and 1-210b2. The transcript is attached below. If you are not satisfied with the response, the attached sheet details the appeal procedures available to you under the law. Sincerely, Gregory Panett. Everything else was refused, but I have Sal's interview. However, by refusing, they confirmed that Jason Bell was at least interviewed in the investigation. Maybe the police had their suspicions too. The attached transcript. Salil Singh recorded interview. Date 4/19/2014. Duration 11 minutes. Location interviewee's residence. Conducted by officers from the Connecticut State Police. This interview is being tape recorded. It is the 19th of April 2014, and the time is now 3:55 p.m. My name is, and I'm based with the Connecticut State Police. Also present is my colleague. Could you please state your full name? Oh, sure, Salil Singh. And can you confirm your date of birth for me? February 14th, 1996. A Valentine's baby, eh? Yeah. So, Salil, let us get some introductory bits out of the way first. Just so you understand, this is a voluntary interview, and you are free to stop it or ask us to leave at any time. We are interviewing you in relation to the missing persons inquiry of Andrea Bell, as someone who has a close relationship with her. Understand? Yes, sir. As we understand it, you are Andrea's boyfriend, correct? Yeah, no one calls her Andrea. She's Andy. Okay, and how long have you and Andy been together? Since just before Christmas last year, so around 4 months. Sorry, do you know anything yet? Do you think she's okay? Well, we cannot rule out that Andy has been the victim of a crime yet. Of course, we hope otherwise. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm just worried. That's understandable, Salil. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, when was the last time you saw Andy? At school, like I said. We talked in the parking lot at the end of the day, and then I walked home and she was driving home. And at any time up until that Friday afternoon, had Andy ever indicated to you a desire to run away from home? No, never. Did she ever tell you about any problems she was having at home with her family? I mean, yeah, we obviously talked about stuff like that. Never anything major, just normal teenager stuff. I always thought that But there wasn't anything recent that would make her want to run away, if that's what you're asking. No. Can you think of any reason why Andy would want to leave home and not be found? I don't think so. How would you describe your relationship with Andy? What do you mean? Is it a sexual relationship? Yeah, sort of. Sort of? We haven't actually, gone all the way. You and Andy haven't had sex? No. And would you say your relationship is a healthy one? I don't know. What do you mean? Do you argue often? No, we don't argue. I'm not confrontational, which is why I think we're okay together. And were you arguing in the days before Andy went missing? No, we weren't. So, in written statements taken this morning, they both separately allege that they saw you and Andy arguing at school this week, on the Thursday and the Friday. Claims it's the worst she has seen you both argue since the start of your relationship. Do you know anything about this, Salil? Any truth to it? Maybe a bit. Andy can have a temper. Sometimes it's hard not to answer back. And can you tell me what you were arguing about in this instance? I don't know if... No, it's private. No, you don't want to tell me? Yeah, no, I don't want to tell you. You may not think it's relevant, but even the smallest detail could help us find her. No, I still can't say. Sure? Yeah. Okay, let's move on then. Did you have any plans to meet up with Andy last night? No, none. I had plans with my friends. Because said that when Andy left the house at around 10:30 p.m., she presumed Andy was going to see her boyfriend. No, Andy knew I was at my friend's house and wasn't meeting her. So where were you last night? I was at my friend's house. Do you want to know times? Yeah, sure. I think I got there at around 8:30. My dad dropped me off, and I left at around 12:15 to walk home. My curfew is 1 a.m. when I'm not staying over somewhere. I think I got in just before 1. You can check with my dad. He was up. And who else was with you at house? And did you have any contact with Andy that evening? No, she tried to call me at 9ish, but I was busy and didn't pick up. I can show you my phone. And have you had any contact with her at all since she went missing? Since I found out this morning, I've called her like 1,000,000 times. It keeps going to voicemail. I think her phone is off. Okay, and did you want to ask? Yeah, so Salil, I know you've said you don't know, but where do you think Andy could be? Honestly, I think she could just be taking a break somewhere with her phone off so she can ignore the world for a while. That's what I'm hoping this is. What might Andy need a break from? I don't know. And where do you think she could be taking this break? I don't know. Andy keeps a lot to herself. Maybe she has some friends we don't know about. I don't know. Okay, so is there anything else you might want to add that could help us find Andy? No. If I can, I'd like to help in any searches if you're doing them. Alright then, I've asked everything we need to at the moment. I'm going to end the interview there. It's 4:06 p.m. and I am stopping the tape. Okay, deep breath. I've read it over 6 times, even out loud. And now I have this horrible sinking feeling. This does not look great for Sal. I know it's hard to read nuances from a transcript, but Sal was very evasive with the police about what he and Andy were arguing about. I don't think anything is too private that you wouldn't tell the police if it could help find your missing girlfriend. If it was potentially about Andy seeing another man, why didn't Sal just tell the police? It could have led them to the possible real killer right from the start. But what if Sal was covering up something worse? Something that would have given him real motive to kill Andy. We know he's lying elsewhere in the interview, when he tells the police what time he left Max's. It would crush me to have come all this way just to find out that Sal really is guilty. Ravi would be devastated. Maybe I should never have started this project, should never have spoken to him. I'm going to have to show him the transcript. I told him I was expecting a reply any day now, but this might hurt him. I don't want to hurt him. Maybe I should lie and say it hasn't arrived yet. Could Sal really have been guilty all along? Sal as the killer has always been the path of least resistance. But was it so easy for everyone to believe because it's also true? But no, the note. Somebody warned me to stop digging. Yes, the note could have been someone's idea of a prank, and if the note was a joke, then Sal could be the real killer. But it doesn't feel right. Someone in this town has something to hide, and they're scared because I'm on the right path to chasing them down. I just have to keep chasing, even when the path is resisting me. Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, Secret Older Guy, Nat De Silva, Daniel De Silva. Chapter 15. Pip crossed the road, with Josh's wriggling hand in hers and Barney's leash in the other. Outside the cafe, the one nearest their house, Pip crouched to loop the leash around the leg of a table. "Sit. Good boy," she said, stroking the dog's head as he gave her a tongue-lolling smile. She opened the door and ushered Josh inside. "I'm a good boy, too." "Good boy, Josh," she said, absently patting his head as she scanned the sandwich shelves. She picked out 4 different flavors: turkey sub for Dad, of course, and cheese and ham without the gross bits for Josh. "Hi, Jackie," Pip said, smiling as she took the bundle to the register. "Hello, sweetheart. Big Amobi lunch plans?" "We're assembling patio furniture, and it's getting tense," she said. "Need sandwiches to calm the hangry troops." "Ah, yes," said Jackie. "Tell your mom I'll swing by next week with that book we were talking about." "Will do, thanks." Pip took the paper bag from her and turned back to Josh. "Come on then, bud." They were almost at the door when Pip spotted her, sitting at a table alone, her hands wrapped around a takeout coffee. Pip hadn't seen her in town for years. She'd assumed she was still away at college. She must be 21 by now, maybe 22. And here she was, just feet away, tracing her fingertips over the lid, looking more like Andy than she ever had before. Her face was slimmer now, and she'd started dyeing her hair lighter, just like her sister's had been. But hers was cut short and blunt above her shoulders where Andy's hung down to her waist. Yet even though the likeness was there, Becca Bell's face did not quite have the composite magic of her sister's, a girl who had looked more like a painting than a real person. Pip knew she shouldn't. She knew it was wrong and insensitive, and all those words Mrs. Morgan had used in her "I'm concerned about the direction of your project" warnings. And even though she could feel the sensible and rational parts of herself rallying in her head, she had already decided. That one flake of recklessness contaminating all other thoughts. "Josh," she said, handing him the sandwich bag, "can you go and sit outside with Barney for a minute? I'll be 2 seconds. He looked pleadingly up at her. "You can play on my phone," she said, digging it out of her pocket. "Yes," he said in hissed victory, taking it and bumping into the door on his way out. Pip's heart kicked up in an agitated protest. She ignored it. "Hi, Becca, right?" she said, walking over and placing her hands on the back of the empty chair. "Yeah, do I know you?" Becca's eyebrows dropped in scrutiny. "No, you don't." Pip's smile felt tight. "I'm Pippa. I live in town, just in my last year at Fairview High." "Oh, wait," Becca said, shuffling in her seat. "Don't tell me. You're the girl doing a project about my sister, aren't you?" Pip stammered. "How did you know?" She paused. "I'm kind of seeing Stanley Forbes. Kind of not." She shrugged. Pip tried to hide her shock with a fake cough. "Oh, nice guy." "Yeah." Becca looked down at her coffee. "I just graduated, and I'm doing an internship over at the Fairview Mail." "Oh, cool," Pip said. "I actually want to be a journalist, too." "Is that why you're doing a project about Andy?" She went back to tracing her finger around the lid of the cup. "Yes," Pip nodded, "and I'm sorry for intruding, and you can absolutely tell me to go away if you want. I just wondered whether you could answer some questions I have about your sister." Becca sat forward in her chair, her hair swinging about her neck. She coughed. What kind of questions?" "Far too many. They all rushed in at the same time." "Oh, like, did you and Andy used to get an allowance from your parents?" Becca's face wrinkled in surprise. "That's not what I was expecting. And no, not really. They kind of just bought us stuff as and when we needed it." "Why?" "Just filling in some gaps," Pip said. "And was there ever tension between your sister and your dad?" Becca's eyes dropped to the floor. Her voice cracked. She wrapped her hands around the cup and stood, the chair screaming as it scraped against the tiled floor. "Actually, I don't think this is a good idea," she said, rubbing her nose. "Sorry, it's just..." "No, I'm sorry." Pip stepped back. "I shouldn't have come over." "No, it's okay," Becca said. "It's just that things are finally settled again. Me and my mom, we've found our new normal, and things are getting better. I don't think dwelling on the past, on Andy stuff, is healthy for either of us. Especially not my mom, so yeah. She shrugged. You do your project if that's what you want to do, but I'd prefer it if you left us out of it. Absolutely, Pip said. I'm so sorry. No worries. Becca's head dipped in a hesitant nod as she walked briskly past and out the cafe door. Pip waited several moments for her turbulent heart to slide back down into her chest, and then she followed her out. All right, she said, unhooking Barney's leash from the table's leg. Let's go home. Don't think that lady liked you, Josh said, eyes still dancing across her phone screen. Were you being unfriendly, Hippo Pippo? Pippa Fits a Moby, 9/22/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 19. I know, I pushed my luck trying to question Becca. It was wrong. I just couldn't help myself. She was right there. The last person to see Andy alive. Other than the killer, of course. Her sister was murdered. I can't expect her to want to talk about it, even if I am trying to find the truth. It's made me realize I'm lacking a certain insight into Andy's home life. But obviously, it's not even in the realm of possibility to try to speak to her parents. I've been stalking Becca on Facebook back to 5 years ago, pre-murder. Other than learning that her hair used to be mousier and her cheeks fuller, it looks like she only had one really close friend in 2014, Jess Walker. Maybe Jess will be detached enough to be less emotional about Andy, yet close enough that I can get some of the answers I desperately need. Jess Walker's profile is very neat and informative. She's currently in college in New Jersey. I scrolled back to 5 years ago. It took forever. And back then, nearly all her photos were taken with Becca Bell, until they abruptly weren't. Time to send her a message and see if she'd be willing to do a phone interview. Pippa Fits a Moby, 9/24/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 20. Transcript of interview with Jess Walker, Becca Bell's friend. We talk a bit about Fairview, how the school has changed since she left, which teachers are still there, etc. It's a few minutes until I can steer the conversation back to my project. So, I wanted to ask you, really, about the Bells, not just Andy. What kind of family they were, how they got along, things like that. Oh, well, I mean, that's a loaded question right there. What do you mean? I don't know if dysfunctional is quite the right word. People use that as a funny kind of tribute. I mean it in the literal sense, like they weren't quite normal. I mean, they seemed normal unless you spent a lot of time there, like I did. What do you mean by not quite normal? I don't know if that's a good way of describing it. There were just a couple of things that weren't quite right. It was mainly Jason, Becca's dad. What did he do? It was just the way he spoke to them, the girls and Dawn. If you only saw it a couple of times, you'd think he was just trying to be funny. But I saw it often, very often, and I think it definitely affected the environment in that house. What? Sorry, I'm talking in circles, aren't I? It's difficult to explain. He would just say things to them, like little digs about how they looked. The total opposite of how you should talk to your teenage daughters. He'd pick at things he knew they were self-conscious about. He said things to Becca about her weight and would laugh it off as a joke. He'd tell Andy she needed to put on makeup before she left the house, that her face was her moneymaker. Jokes like that all the time. Like how they looked was the most important thing in the world. I remember when I was over for dinner one time, Andy was upset that she didn't get into any of the colleges she'd applied to, only her backup, that crappy local one. And Jason said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. You're only going to college to find a rich husband anyway." No way. And he did it to his wife too. He'd say really uncomfortable things when I was there, like how she was looking old, counting the wrinkles on her face, saying that he'd married her for her looks and she'd married him for his money, and only one of them was upholding their deal. I mean, they would all laugh when he did it, like it was just family teasing. But seeing it happen so many times, it was unsettling. I didn't like being there. And do you think it affected the girls? Oh, Becca never, ever wanted to talk about her dad. But yes, it was obvious it wreaked havoc on their self-esteem. Andy started caring so much about what she looked like, about what people thought of her. There would be screaming matches when her parents said it was time to go out and Andy wasn't ready, hadn't done her hair or makeup yet. Or when they refused to buy her a new lipstick she said she needed. How that girl could ever have thought she was ugly is beyond me. Becca became obsessed with their flaws and started skipping meals. It affected them in different ways. Andy got louder, Becca got quieter. And what was the relationship between the sisters like? Jason's influence was all over that as well. He made everything in that house a competition. If one of the girls did something good, like got a good grade, he would use it to put the other one down. But what were Becca and Andy like together? I mean, they were teenage sisters. They fought like hell, and then a few minutes later it was forgotten. Becca always looked up to Andy, though. They were really close in age, only 15 months between them. Andy was in the year just above us at school. And when we turned 16, Becca started, I guess, trying to copy Andy. I think because Andy always seemed so confident, so admired. Becca started trying to dress like her. She planned to ask for the exact same car as Andy after she passed her driving test. And she started wanting to go out like Andy too, to house parties. You mean the ones called calamity parties? Yeah, those. Even though it was people in Andy's year that threw them, and we hardly knew anyone, she convinced me to go one time. I think it was in March, so not too long before Andy's disappearance. Andy hadn't invited her or anything. Becca just found out where the next one was being hosted, and we turned up. We walked there. How was it? Ugh, awful. We just sat in the corner all night, not talking to anyone. Andy completely ignored Becca. I think she was angry she'd turned up. We drank a bit, and then Becca completely disappeared on me. I couldn't find her anywhere in all the drunk people, and I had to walk home, tipsy, all by myself. I was really angry at Becca. Even more angry the next day when she finally answered her phone and I found out what happened. What happened? She wouldn't tell me, but I mean, it was pretty obvious when she asked me to go and get the morning after pill with her. I asked, and she just would not tell me who she'd slept with. I think she might have been embarrassed. That upset me at the time, especially as she had considered it important enough to completely abandon me at a party I never wanted to go to. We had a big fight, and I guess that was the start of the wedge in our friendship. Becca skipped some school, and I didn't see her for a few weekends, and that's when Andy went missing. Did you see the Bells much after Andy disappeared? I visited a few times, but Becca didn't want to talk much. None of them did. Jason had an even shorter temper than usual, especially the day the police interviewed him. Apparently, on the night Andy disappeared, the alarm had gone off at his business offices during the dinner party. He'd driven there to check it out, but he'd had a lot to drink, so he was nervous talking to the police about it. That's what Becca told me anyway. But yeah, the house was just so quiet. And even months later, after it was presumed Andy was dead and never coming home, Becca's mom insisted on leaving Andy's room as it was, just in case. It was all really sad. So when you were at that calamity party in March, did you see what Andy was up to? Who she was with? Yeah. You know, I never actually knew that Sal was Andy's boyfriend until after she went missing. She'd never had him over at the house. I knew she had a boyfriend, though, and after that calamity party, I had assumed it was this other guy. I saw them alone, whispering and looking pretty close, several times. Never once saw her with Sal. Who? Who was the guy? He was this tall blonde guy, longish hair, struck me as kind of obnoxious. Max? Was his name Max Hastings? Yeah, I think that was him. You saw Max and Andy alone at the party? Yep, looking pretty friendly. Jess, thanks so much for talking with me. You've been a big help. Oh, no problem. Hey Pippa, do you know how Becca's doing now? I saw her just the other day, actually. I think she's doing okay. She's interning at the Fairview newspaper. She looks well. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm struggling to even process the amount I've learned from that one conversation. Jason Bell is looking darker and darker the more I investigate. And now I know that he left his dinner party for a while on that night. From what Jess said, it sounds like he was emotionally abusive to his family, a bully, a chauvinist, an adulterer, and it's no wonder Andy turned out the way she did in a toxic environment like that. Jason wrecked his daughter's self-esteem so much that one became a bully like him and the other turned to self-harming. I know from Andy's friend Emma that Becca had been hospitalized in the weeks before Andy's disappearance and that Andy was supposed to be watching her sister the night she went missing. It seems like Jess didn't know about the self-harming. She just thought Becca had skipped school. So Andy wasn't the perfect girl and the Bells weren't the perfect family. All those smiling family photographs are lies. Speaking of lies, Max fucking Hastings. Here's a direct quote from his interview when I asked how well he knew Andy. "We sometimes spoke, yeah, but we weren't ever like friends. I didn't really know her, like an acquaintance." An acquaintance that you were seen cuddling up to at a party? So much so that a witness presumed you were Andy's boyfriend? And there's this as well. Even though they were in the same school year, Andy was young for her grade, and Max had been held back a year and has a September birthday. When you look at it like this, there is almost a 2-year age gap between them. From Andy's perspective, Max was technically an older guy, but was he a secret older guy? Right up close and personal behind Sal's back? I've tried looking Max up on Facebook before. His profile is barren, just vacation and Christmas pictures with his parents and birthday wishes from relatives. I remember thinking before that it seemed way too innocent for him, but I shrugged it off. Well, not anymore, and I've made a discovery. In some of Naomi's pictures online, Max isn't tagged as Max Hastings, but as Nancy Tango Tits. I thought it was some kind of private joke before, but no. Nancy Tango Tits is Max's actual Facebook profile. The Max Hastings one must be a tame decoy he kept for colleges and potential employers. The same way some of my friends have started changing their profile names to make them unsearchable when applying to college. The real Max Hastings and all his wild drunken photos and posts from friends has been hiding as Nancy. This is what I'm guessing at least. I can't actually get on to see anything. Nancy has his privacy settings on full throttle. I can only see photos or posts that Naomi is also tagged in. It's not giving me much to work with. No secret pictures of Max and Andy kissing in the background. None of his photos from the night she disappeared. I've already learned my lesson here. When you catch someone lying about a murdered girl, you go ask them why. Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Nat Da Silva, Daniel Da Silva, Max Hastings, Nancy Tango Tits. Chapter 16. Pip knocked again, harder this time, hoping she would be heard over the droning of a vacuum cleaner running inside. It clicked off abruptly, leaving a slightly buzzy silence in its wake. Then sharp footsteps on a hard floor. The door opened and a well-dressed woman with cherry red lipstick stood before her. "Hi," Pip said. "I'm a friend of Max's. Is he in?" "Oh, hi." The woman smiled, revealing a smear of red on one of her top teeth. She stood back to let Pip through. "He certainly is. Come in." "Pippa," she smiled back, stepping inside. "Pippa, yes, he's in the living room." Shouting at me for vacuuming while he's playing some deathmatch. Can't pause it, apparently. Max's mom walked Pip down the hall and through the open archway into the living room. Max was spread out on the sofa in plaid pajama bottoms and a white t-shirt, his hands gripped around a controller as he furiously thumbed the X button. His mom cleared her throat. Max looked up. "Oh, hi, Pippa, funny last name," he said in his deep voice, his eyes returning to his game. "What are you doing here?" Pip fought back a grimace with a fake smile. "Oh, nothing much," she shrugged nonchalantly. "Just here to ask you how well you really knew Andy Bell." The game was paused. Max sat up, stared at Pip, then his mom, then back to Pip. His mom said. "Would anyone like a drink?" "No, we don't," Max stood. "Upstairs, Pippa." He strode past them and up the grand stairs in the hallway, his bare feet thundering on the steps. Pip followed, flashing an apologetic wave back at his mother. At the top, Max held open his bedroom door and gestured her inside. Pip hesitated, one foot suspended above the vacuum-tracked carpet. Max jerked his head impatiently. His mom was just downstairs. She should be safe. She planted her foot and strode into his room. "Thank you for that," he said, closing the door. "My mom didn't need to know I've been talking about Andy and Sal again. The woman is a bloodhound, never lets anything go." "Pitbull," Pip said. "It's pitbulls that don't let things go." Max sat back on his maroon bedspread. "Whatever. What do you want?" I said, "I want to know how well you really knew Andy." "I already told you," he said, leaning back on his elbows and shooting a glance up past Pip's shoulder. "I didn't know her that well." Pip leaned back against his door. "Just acquaintances, right? That's what you said?" "Yeah, I did." He scratched his nose. I'll be honest, I'm starting to find your tone a little annoying. Good, she said, following Max's eyes as they looked over again to a notice board on the far wall, littered with posters and pinned up notes and photographs. And I'm starting to find your lies a little annoying. What lies? He said. I didn't know her well. Interesting, Pip said. I spoke to a witness who went to a calamity party that you and Andy attended in March 2014. Interesting, because she said she saw you two alone several times that night, looking pretty comfortable with each other. Who said that? Another micro glanced over to the notice board. I can't reveal my sources. Oh my God, he laughed, a deep throaty laugh. You're deluded. You know you're not actually a police officer, right? The skin on her neck flashed hot. She didn't like that, him talking down to her. You're avoiding the question, she said. Were you and Andy secretly seeing each other behind Sal's back? Max laughed again. He was my best friend. That's not an answer. Pip folded her arms. No, I wasn't seeing Andy Bell. Like I said, I didn't know her that well. So why did this source see you together? In a manner that made her think you were actually Andy's boyfriend. While Max rolled his eyes at the question, Pip stole her own glance at the notice board. The scribbled notes and bits of paper were several layers deep in places, with hidden corners and curled edges. Glossy photos of Max skiing and surfing were pinned on top. A Reservoir Dogs poster took up most of the board. I don't know, he said. Whoever it was, they were mistaken. Probably drunk. An unreliable source, you might say. Okay. Pip moved away from the door. She took a few steps toward the far wall, then paced back a couple so Max wouldn't realize as she moved incrementally toward the notice board. So let's get this straight. She paced again, positioning herself closer and closer. You're saying you never spoke one-on-one with Andy at a calamity party? I don't know if never, Max said, but it's not like you're implying. Okay. Pip looked up from the floor, just a couple of feet from the board now. And why do you keep looking over here? She twisted on her heels and hurriedly started flipping through the papers pinned to the board. Hey, stop! She heard the bed groan as Max quickly got to his feet. Pip's eyes and fingers scanned over to-do lists, scribbled names of companies and grad schemes, leaflets, and old photos of a young Max in a hospital bed. Heavy barefooted steps behind her. That's my private stuff. And then she saw a small white corner of paper tucked underneath Reservoir Dogs. She pulled and ripped the paper out just as Max grabbed her arm. Pip spun toward him, and his fingers dug into her wrists. They both looked down at the piece of paper in her hand. Pip's mouth fell open. Oh, for fuck's sake. Max let her arm go and ran his fingers through his untamed hair. Just acquaintances? She said shakily. Who do you think you are? Max said, going through my stuff. Just acquaintances? Pip asked again, holding the printed photo up to Max's face. He tried to snatch it, but she pulled back. It was Andy. A photo she'd taken of herself in a mirror. Standing on a red and white tiled floor, her right hand raised and clutched around the phone. Her mouth was pushed out in a pout, and her eyes looked straight out of the page. She was wearing nothing but a pair of black underwear. Care to explain? Pip said. No. Oh, so you want to explain it to the police first? I get it. Pip glared at him and took one step toward the door. Don't be dramatic, Max said, returning her glare with his glassy blue eyes. It has nothing to do with what happened to her. I'll let them decide that. No, Pippa. He blocked her way out. Look, this is really not how it looks. Andy didn't give me that picture. I found it. You found it? Where? It was just lying around at school. I found it and I kept it. Andy never knew about it. There was a hint of pleading in his voice. You found a nude picture of Andy just lying around at school? She didn't even try to hide her skepticism. Yes, it was hidden in the back of a classroom, I swear. And you didn't tell Andy or anyone that you'd found it? Asked Pip. No, I just kept it. Why? I don't know. His voice scrambled higher. Because she's hot and I wanted to. And then it seemed wrong to throw it away after... What? Don't judge me. She took the photo. She clearly wanted it to be seen. You expect me to believe that you just found this basically naked picture of Andy, a girl you were seen getting close to at parties? Max cut her off. Those are completely unrelated. I wasn't talking to Andy because we were together, and neither do I have that picture because we were together. We weren't together. We never were. So you were alone talking to Andy at that calamity party? Pip said triumphantly. Max held his face in his hands for a moment, his fingertips pressed into his eyes. Fine, he said quietly. If I tell you, will you please just leave me alone? And no police. That depends. Okay, fine. I knew Andy better than I said I did. A lot better. Since before she started with Sal, but I wasn't seeing her. I was buying from her. Pip looked at him in confusion, her mind going back over his last words. Buying drugs? She asked softly. Max nodded. Nothing super hard though, just weed and a few pills. Holy shit. Hold on. Pip held up her finger to push the world back. Give her brain space to think. Andy Bell was dealing drugs? Well, yeah, but only at calamities and when we went out and stuff. Just to a few people, a handful at most. She wasn't like a proper dealer. Max paused. She was working with an actual dealer in town. Got him an in with the school crowd. It worked out for both of them. That's why she always had so much cash, Pip said, the puzzle piece slotting into place in her head with an almost audible click. Did she use? Not really. I think she only did it for the money. Money and the power it gave her. I could tell she enjoyed that. And did Sal know she was selling drugs? Max laughed. Oh no, he said. No. Sal always hated drugs. That wouldn't have gone down well. Andy hid it from him. She was good at secrets. I think the only people that knew were those who bought from her. But I always thought Sal was a little naive. I'm surprised he never found out. How long had she been doing this? Pip said, feeling a crackle of sinister excitement. A while. Max looked up at the ceiling, his eyes circling as though he were turning over his own memories. I think the first time I bought weed off her was early 2013, when she was still 16. That was probably when it started. And who was Andy's dealer? Who did she get drugs from? Max shrugged. I don't know. I never knew the guy. I only ever bought through Andy, and she never told me. Pip deflated. You don't know anything? You never bought drugs in Fairview after Andy was killed? Nope. He shrugged again. I don't know anything more. But were other people at Calamity still using drugs? Where did they get them? I don't know, Pippa, Max over-enunciated. I told you what you wanted to hear. Now I want you to leave. He stepped forward and whipped the photo out of Pip's hands. His thumb closed over Andy's face, the picture crumpling in his grip. A crease split down the middle of Andy's body as he folded her away. Chapter 17. Pip spotted Ant before the others did, waving him over to their table. He crossed the cafeteria, 2 packaged sandwiches cradled in his arms. Hey guys, he said, sliding onto the bench beside Lauren, of course, already tearing into sandwich number 1. How was practice? Pip asked. Ant looked up at her warily, his mouth open mid-chew. Fine, he replied, then swallowed. Why are you being nice to me? What do you want? Nothing, Pip laughed. I'm just asking how soccer was. No, Zach butted in. That's far too friendly for you. Something's up. Nothing's up, she shrugged. Only the national debt and global sea levels. Probably hormones, Ant said. Pip wound the invisible crank by her hand, jerkily raising her middle finger up at him. They were on to her already. Well, at least it was a welcome break from their teasing about never seeing her anymore, even though she saw them every single day at school. Distracted was the word Lauren had used last week. Pip waited a full 5 minutes for the group to finish their conversation about the latest episode of the zombie show they all watched, as Connor stuffed his ears and hummed loudly because he hadn't seen it yet either. Pip hadn't either. How many had she missed? The last 3? So, Aunt, she tried again, you know your friend George from soccer? Yes, I know my friend George from soccer, he said, glancing to check that Lauren found him as amusing as he found himself. He's in the crowd that still does calamity parties, right? Aunt nodded. Yeah, actually, I think the next party is at his house. His parents are out of town for an anniversary or something. This Saturday? Yeah. Do you... Pip sat forward, resting her elbows on the table. Do you think you could get us all invited? Every single one of her friends turned to stare at her. Who are you, and what have you done with Pippa Fitz-Amobi? Kara asked. What? She felt herself getting defensive, words rushing out unchecked. It's our last year at school, and I thought it would be nice for us all to go. This is the opportune time before application and homework deadlines creep up. That still sounds Pippish to me. Connor smiled. You want to go to a house party? Aunt said pointedly. Yes, she said. Everyone will be smashed, people throwing up, passing out. A lot of mess on the floor, Aunt said. It's not really your scene, Pip. No, of course it wasn't. She couldn't think of anything worse, but she stood firm. Sounds fun. I want to go. Okay, fine. Aunt clapped his hands together with a grin. Let's do it. Pip stopped by Ravi's on her way home from school to give him the latest updates. He handed her a black coffee, making another joke about it as she took a sip. Pip choked. Why was she laughing? The joke wasn't even that funny, objectively speaking. She coughed and her cheeks flushed. Okay, Ravi finally said when she was done talking, his head bouncing in a half nod as he tried to process the image of Andy Bell, cute, button-nosed blonde, as a drug dealer. Okay, so you're thinking the man who supplied her could be a suspect? Yes, she said. If you have the depravity to peddle drugs to kids, I definitely think you could be the kind of person inclined to murder. Yeah, I see the logic, he said, nodding. How are we going to find this drug dealer, though? She set down her mug and focused her eyes on his. I'm going undercover. Chapter 18. It's just a house party, Pip said, trying to wrestle her face out of Kara's grip. Yeah, but you're lucky. You can pull off eyeshadow. Stop wriggling, I'm almost done. Pip sighed and went limp, submitting to the forced preening. She was still sulking that her friends had made her change out of her overalls and into one of Lauren's dresses that was short enough to be a t-shirt. She thought she'd looked fine before, but Kara and Lauren were both overexcited about their first calamity and wanted to go all out. Lauren was wearing a new sequined dress, and Kara's usual eyeliner wings had grown by an inch. They didn't normally do this kind of thing. Girls, Pip's mom called up the stairs, you'd better hurry up. Victor started to show Lauren his dance moves down here. Oh geez, Pip said. Am I done? We need to go and rescue her. Kara leaned forward and blew on her face. Yep. Awesome, said Pip, grabbing her shoulder bag and phone. Let's go. Hello, Pickle, her dad said loudly as Pip and Kara made their way downstairs. Lauren and I have decided that I should come to your kilometer party too. Calamity, Dad, and over my dead brain cells. He strolled over, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and squeezed. Little Pipsy's going to a house party. I know, Pip's mom said, smiling, with alcohol and boys. Yes. Her dad let go and looked down at Pip, a serious expression on his face, and his finger raised. Pip, I want you to remember to be, at least, a little irresponsible. Right, Pip announced, grabbing her car keys and strolling to the front door. We're going now. Farewell, my strange parents. Fare thee well, her dad said dramatically, waving them off. The three of them strolled up to the front door, and Pip raised her fist to knock. Even the pavement outside was pulsing with the music. The door swung open to reveal a writhing cacophony of slurred chatter and poor lighting. Pip took a tentative step inside, her first breath already tainted with the acrid smell of vodka, sweat, and the slightest hint of vomit. She caught sight of the host, Aunt's friend George, making out aggressively on the stairs with a girl from the grade below, his eyes wide open and staring. Pip, Kara, and Lauren walked farther down the corridor, Lauren having to step over Paul from Econ, who was slumped against the wall, loudly snoring. Well, this looks like some people's idea of fun, Pip said as they entered the open-plan living room and took in the chaos there. Bodies grinding and thrashing to the music, towers of precariously balanced beer bottles, wet carpet patches, and couples pushed up against the condensation-dripping walls. You're the one who was so desperate to come, Lauren said, waving to some girls she took drama with. Pip swallowed. Yeah, and present Pip is always happy with past Pip's decisions. Aunt, Connor, and Zach spotted them and made their way over, maneuvering through the staggering crowd. All right, Connor said, giving Pip and the others clumsy hugs. You're late. Are there cups? Lauren said, holding up a bottle of vodka and lemonade. Yeah, I'll show you, Aunt said eagerly, taking her toward the kitchen. Lauren returned with a drink for Pip, who took frequent imaginary sips as she nodded along with the conversation, laughing at Kara's ridiculous dance moves. How was she so fearless? When the opportunity presented itself, Pip sidled over to the kitchen sink, poured out the cup, and filled it with water. Later, when Zach offered to refill her cup, she had to pull the stunt again, regretting it immediately when she got cornered by Joe King in the kitchen. He sat behind her in English, and his only form of humor was to say something absurd, wait for his victim to pull a confused face, and then say, "I'm only Joe King." Pip finally excused herself and went to hide in a corner, not quite back in her comfort zone, but close enough. Standing there alone in the shadows, she scrutinized the room, watching the dancers and the over-enthusiastic kissers, searching for any signs of shifty hand trades or clenching jaws, any over-wide pupils, anything that might give her a possible lead to Andy's drug dealer. 10 minutes passed, and Pip didn't notice anything dubious, other than a boy named Steven smashing a TV remote and hiding the evidence in a flower vase. She watched him wander through the adjacent family room and toward the back door, reaching for a pack of cigarettes from his back pocket. Of course. Outside with the smokers should have been the first place on her list to scout out. Pip made her way through the mayhem, protecting herself with her elbows. There were a handful of people outside, a couple of dark shadows rolling around on the trampoline at the end of the yard, a tearful Stella Chapman wailing into her phone at someone, 2 girls on the swing set having a very serious conversation, punctuated by frequent hand-slap-to-mouth gasps, and Stephen Thompson or Timpson, who she used to sit behind in math. He was perched on the garden wall, a cigarette dangling from his mouth as he searched in his various pockets. Pip wandered over. "Hi," she said, plonking herself down on the wall beside him. "Hi, Pippa," Stephen said, taking the cigarette from his mouth so he could talk. "What's up?" "Oh, nothing much," Pip said. "Just came out here looking for Mary Jane." "Dunno who she is, sorry," he said, finally pulling out a neon green lighter. "Not a who." Pip gave him a meaningful look. "You know, I'm looking to blast a roach." "Excuse me?" Pip had spent an hour online that morning researching the current street names on Urban Dictionary. She tried again, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You know, looking for some herb, the doob, a bit of hippie lettuce, giggle smoke, some skunk, wacky tobacco. You know what I mean. Ganja." Stephen burst into laughter. "Oh my God," he cackled, "you are so trashed." "Certainly am." She tried to feign a drunken giggle. "So, do you have any? Some swag grass?" When he stopped hooting to himself, he turned to look her up and down, his eyes very obviously stalling on her chest and pasty legs. Pip squirmed inside, a slurry of disgust and embarrassment. But she had to play along. She was undercover. "Yeah," Stephen said, biting his bottom lip. "I can roll us a joint." He searched his pockets again and pulled out a small baggie of weed and a packet of rolling papers. "Yes, please," Pip nodded, feeling anxious and excited and a little sick. "You get rolling. Roll it like a rolling pin." He laughed at her again and licked one edge of the paper, trying to hold eye contact with her while his stubby pink tongue was out. Pip looked away. It crossed her mind that maybe she had gone too far this time for an assignment. Maybe. But this wasn't just a project anymore. This was for Sal and Ravi. For the truth. She could do this for them. Stephen lit the joint and took 2 long sucks on its end before passing it to Pip. She took it awkwardly between her middle and index fingers. She turned her head sharply so her hair flicked over her face and pretended to take a couple of drags. Nice," she said, passing it back. "You look nice," Stephen said, offering the joint again. Pip tried to take it without her fingers touching his. Another pretend puff, but the smell was cloying and she coughed over her next question. "So," she said, "who do you buy from? You know, so I can get in on that too." "Just this guy in town," Stephen shuffled on the wall closer to Pip, "called Howie." "And where does Howie live?" Pip said, passing back the weed and using the movement as an excuse to shift away from him. "Dunno," Stephen said. "He doesn't deal from his house. I meet him at the station parking lot, down at the end with no cameras." "In the evening?" Pip asked. "Usually, yeah, whatever time he texts me." "You have his number?" Pip opened her bag and reached for her own phone. "Can I have it?" Stephen shook his head. "He'd be mad if he knew I was just handing it out. You don't need to go to him. If you want something, you can just pay me and I'll get it for you. I'll even discount." He winked. "I'd really rather buy direct," Pip said, feeling a prickle of annoyance creeping up her neck. "No can do." He shook his head again, eyeing her mouth. Pip looked away quickly, her long dark hair a curtain between them to hide her frustration. She was just about to give it up when the spark of an idea pushed through. "Well, how can I buy through you?" she said, taking the joint from him. "You don't even have my number." "Ah, and what a shame that is," Stephen said, voice so slimy it practically dripped out of his mouth. He pulled his phone from his pocket, jabbed his finger at the screen, and handed her the unlocked phone. "Put your digits in there." "Okay." Pip opened his contacts and shifted her shoulders, facing Stephen so he couldn't see the screen. She typed the name in the search bar, and it was almost too easy. Howie Bowers and his phone number. She studied the sequence of numbers. Damn, she'd never be able to remember the whole thing. Another idea flickered to life. Maybe she could take a picture of the screen. Her own phone was on the wall just beside her. But Stephen was right there, staring at her, chewing his finger. She needed some kind of distraction. She lurched forward, launching the joint across the lawn. "Sorry," she said. "I thought there was a bug on me." "Don't worry, I'll get it." Stephen jumped down from the wall. Pip had just a few seconds. She grabbed her phone, swiped left into the camera app, and positioned it above Stephen's screen. Her heart was thudding, her chest constricting uncomfortably. The camera flicked in and out of focus, wasting precious time. The shot finally cleared, and she took the picture, dropping her phone into her lap just as Stephen turned. "It's still lit," he said, jumping back up on the wall, sitting far too close to her. Pip held out Stephen's phone to him. Sorry, I've decided that drugs aren't for me. I have to go." "Don't be a tease," Stephen said, closing his fingers around both his phone and Pip's hand. He leaned into her. "No, thank you," she said, scooting back. Then Stephen grabbed the back of her head and lunged for her face. Pip twisted out of the way and shoved him so hard that he fell off the garden wall and sprawled on the wet grass. "You stupid slut," he said, picking himself up and wiping off his pants. "You degenerate, perverted ape," Pip shouted back. "I said no." That was when she realized. She didn't know how or when it happened, but they were now alone in the backyard. Fear flushed through her in an instant, her skin bristling. Stephen climbed back over the wall as Pip turned, hurrying toward the door. "Hey, it's okay, we can talk for a bit more," he said, grabbing her wrist to pull her back. "Let me go, Stephen," she spat the words at him. "But—" Pip grabbed his wrist with her other hand and squeezed, digging her nails into his skin. Stephen hissed and let go, and Pip did not hesitate. She ran toward the house and slammed the door, flipping the lock behind her, turning away as Stephen knocked angrily at it. She wound her way through the crowd on the makeshift dance floor, jostled this way and that. It was too dark and stuffy inside the crush of all these bodies, and Pip couldn't find Kara anywhere. Couldn't find any of her friends. She stood there alone, surrounded by people, an aftershock of fear quaking through her. Pippa Fitz-Amobi, 10/1/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 22. I waited in my car for 4 hours tonight at the far end of the station parking lot, and I checked, no cameras, so it must have been the right spot. I waited long enough for 3 separate waves of commuters to get in from Manhattan, Dad among them. Luckily, he didn't spot my car. And still, I didn't see anyone hanging around. No one who looked like they were there to buy or sell drugs. Not that I really know what that looks like. I never would have guessed Andy Bell was the type. I could just call Howie and see whether he'd be willing to answer some questions about Andy. That's what Ravi thinks we should do. But let's be real. Howie's not going to give me anything that way. He's a drug dealer. He's not going to admit it to a stranger on the phone like he's casually discussing the weather. No, the only way he'll talk is if we have the appropriate leverage first. I'll go to the station again tomorrow evening. Ravi has work, but I can do this alone. I'll just tell my parents I'm doing my English homework over at Kara's house. The line gets easier the more I have to do it. I need to find Howie. I need this leverage. I need sleep. Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Nat De Silva, Daniel De Silva, Max Hastings, drug dealer, Howie Bowers. Chapter 19. Pip was 13 chapters in, reading by the harsh flashlight on her phone, when she finally noticed a lone figure crossing under a street lamp. She was in her car, parked down at the far end of the darkened parking lot, every half hour marked with the screech and growl of inbound and outbound trains. The streetlights had flickered on about an hour ago, that buzzy yellow color giving the area an unsettling industrial glow. Pip squinted through the window. It was a man in a dark green coat with a furred hood and a bright orange lining. His hood was up and his face hidden by shadows, only his downward lit nose visible. She switched off her phone's flashlight and put down her book. She shifted her seat back so she could crouch on the car floor by the door, hidden from sight, the top of her head and her eyes pressed up against the window. The man walked over to the very outer boundary of the lot and leaned against the fence there, in a gloomy space just between two lamps. Pip watched him closely, holding her breath because it fogged the window and blocked her view. The man pulled out a phone. When the screen lit up, Pip could see his face for the first time, a bony face full of sharp lines and edges and neatly kept dark stubble. Pip wasn't the best with ages, but at a guess, the man was in his late 20s or early 30s. True, this wasn't the first time tonight she thought she'd found Howie Bowers, but those other two men had been dressed in work suits and smart coats, clearly dawdlers of a trainload from the city. This man was different, and there was no doubt he was waiting for something or someone. His thumbs were working away on his phone screen, probably texting a client, or she was just getting ahead of herself in typical Pip fashion. Luckily, she had one sure way to confirm that this man was Howie. She pulled out her phone, holding it low to hide its illumination, scrolled down through her contacts to Howie's name, and called him. Her eyes back to the window, thumb hovering over the end call button, she waited, her nerves spiking with every half second. Then she heard it. Much louder than the outgoing call tone from her own phone, a mechanical quacking sound from the man's hand. Pip watched as he answered and raised his phone to his ear. "Hello?" came the voice from outside, muffled by her window. Fractionally later, the same voice spoke through the speakers of her phone. Howie's voice, confirmed. Pip pressed hang up and watched as he lowered his phone and stared at it, his thick brows bunching and eclipsing his eyes in the shadows. He tapped the phone and raised it to his ear again. "Crap," Pip whispered, snatching up her phone and clicking it on to silent. Less than a second later, the screen lit up with an incoming call from Howie Bowers. Pip let the call silently ring out, her heart drumming painfully against her ribs. That was close, too close. Stupid not to withhold her number. Howie put his phone away and stood, head down, hands back in pockets. Even though she now knew who he was, she didn't have confirmation that he'd been the man who supplied Andy with drugs. The only fact was that Howie Bowers was now currently dealing to kids at school, the same crowd Andy had introduced her dealer to. It could be a coincidence, though Pip didn't trust coincidences. Just then, Howie raised his head and nodded pointedly. Sharp clicking footsteps drew closer and louder. Pip didn't dare move. Someone crossed into view. A tall man wearing a long beige coat and polished black shoes, clearly new. His hair was dark and cut close to his head. As he arrived at Howie's side, he spun to lean against the fence beside him. Pip strained her eyes and gasped. She knew this man. Knew his face from the staff pictures on the Fairview Mail website. Knew his voice from their one very fraught phone interview. It was Stanley Forbes. Stanley Forbes, an outsider to Pip's investigation, who had now cropped up twice. Becca Bell said she was kind of seeing him, and now, here he was, meeting with the man who had possibly supplied Becca's sister with drugs. Neither of the men had spoken yet. Stanley scratched his nose and then pulled out a thick envelope. He shoved the packet into Howie's chest, and only then did she notice that his face was flushed and his hands shaking. Pip raised her phone and, checking the flash was off, took a few pictures of the meeting. "This is the last time, do you hear me?" Stanley spat, making no effort to keep his voice down. Pip could just hear the edges of his words through the car window. "You can't keep asking for more. I don't have it." Howie spoke far too quietly in response, and Pip only heard the mumbled start and end of his sentence. "But, tell." Stanley rounded on him. "I don't think you would dare." They stared into each other's faces for a tense moment, then Stanley turned on his heels and walked quickly away, his coat fanning out behind him. When he was gone, Howie looked through the envelope and stuffed it into his coat, but he wasn't going anywhere yet. He resumed standing against the fence, tapping away at his phone. like he was still waiting for someone. Minutes later, Pip saw someone else approach. Huddling back in her hiding spot, she watched the boy stride toward Howie, raising his hand in a wave. She recognized him too, a boy in the grade below her at school, a boy who played soccer with Anne, Robin something. Their meeting was just as brief. Robin pulled out some cash and handed it over. Howie counted the money and then produced a rolled-up paper bag from his coat pocket. Pip took a few pictures as Howie handed it to Robin and pocketed the cash. Pip could see their mouths moving, but she couldn't hear the words they exchanged. Howie smiled and clapped the boy on the back. Robin, stuffing the bag into his backpack, wandered up the parking lot, calling a low "see you later" as he passed behind Pip's car, so close it made her jump. Ducking below the car window frame, Pip scrolled through the pictures she'd taken. Howie's face was clearly visible in at least 3 of them, and Pip knew the name of the boy she'd caught him selling to. It was textbook leverage, if anyone had ever written a textbook on how to blackmail a drug dealer. Pip froze. Someone was walking just behind her car, moving with shuffling footsteps, whistling. She waited 20 seconds and looked up. Howie was gone now, heading back toward the station. And here was the moment of indecision. Howie was on foot. Pip couldn't follow him in her car, but she really did not want to leave it. Fear started to uncurl in her stomach, driven by one thought. Andy Bell went out in the dark on her own, and she never came back. Pip stifled the voice in her head and climbed out of the car, shutting the door as carefully as she could. She needed to learn as much as she could about this man. He could be the one who supplied Andy, the one who really killed her. Howie was about 40 paces ahead of her. His hood was down now, and its orange lining was easy to spot in the dark. Pip kept the distance between them, her heart getting in 4 beats between each of her steps. She drew back and increased the gap as they passed through the well-lit roundabout outside the station. She couldn't get too close. She followed Howie to the right, down the hill, past the grocery store, across the road, and to the left along Main Street. She trailed behind him all the way up Weevil Road and over the bridge that crossed the rail tracks. Beyond it, Howie turned down a small path away from the street, through a yellowing hedge. Pip waited for Howie to get a little farther ahead before she followed him, emerging on a dimly lit residential road. She kept going, her eyes on the orange furred hood 50 feet ahead of her. Darkness was the easiest of disguises. It made the familiar unknown and strange. It was only when Pip passed the street sign that she realized what road they were on. Monroe. Her heart reacted instantly, now getting in 6 beats between her footsteps. Monroe, the very road where Andy Bell's car was found abandoned after her disappearance. Pip saw Howie turning up ahead, and she darted to hide behind a tree, watching as he headed toward a small bungalow, pulled out his keys, and let himself in. As the door clicked shut, Pip emerged from her hiding place and approached Howie's house. It was a squat, semi-detached home, with tan brick walls and a mossy slate roof. Both windows at the front were covered by thick blinds, the left one now glowing with streaks of yellow as Howie turned the lights on inside. There was a small gravel plot outside the front door with a faded maroon car. Pip stared. There was no delay in her recognition this time. Her mouth fell open and her stomach jumped to her throat, filling her mouth with bile. "Oh my God," she whispered. She stepped back from the house, pulled out her phone, and dialed Ravi's number. "Please tell me you're off your shift," she said when he picked up. "I just got home. Why?" "I need you to come to Monroe right now." Chapter 20. Pip knew from her murder map that it would take Ravi about 18 minutes to walk from his house to Monroe. He was 4 minutes faster, running when he spotted her. "What is it?" he said, out of breath and brushing the hair back from his face. "It is a lot of things," Pip said quietly. "I'm not quite sure where to start, so I just will." "You're freaking me out." His eyes flicked over her face, searching. "I'm freaking me out too." She paused. "Okay, you know how I was looking for the drug dealer from my lead at the calamity party? Well, he was there tonight, dealing in the parking lot, and I followed him home. He lives here, Ravi, the road where Andy's car was found." Ravi's eyes wandered up to trace the outline of the dark street. But how do you even know he's the guy that supplied her? He asked. I didn't for sure, she said. I do now. But wait, there's another thing I have to tell you first, and I don't want you to be mad. Why would I be mad? He looked down at her, his face hardening around the eyes. Because I lied to you, she said, her gaze down on her own feet. But she could feel Ravi's stare, and her stomach jumped up, blocking her throat. Why was this so hard? I told you that Sal's police interview hadn't arrived yet. It did, over 2 weeks ago. What? He said quietly. A look of unconcealed hurt clouded his face. I'm sorry, Pip said, but when it arrived and I read through it, I thought you'd be better off not seeing it. Why? She swallowed. Because it looked really bad for Sal. He was evasive with the police and outright told them he didn't want to say why he and Andy were arguing on that Thursday and Friday. It looked like he was trying to hide his own motive, and I was scared that maybe he'd actually killed her, and I didn't want to upset you. She chanced to look up at his eyes. They were drawn and sad. You think Sal is guilty after all this? No, I don't. I just doubted it for a while, and I was scared what it would do to you. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. It wasn't my place. But I was also wrong to ever doubt Sal. Ravi looked at her, scratching the back of his head. Okay, he said. It's okay. I get why you did it. So what's going on? I just found out exactly why Sal was so weird and evasive in his police interview and why he and Andy were arguing. Come on. She beckoned him to follow and walked back over to Howie's bungalow. She pointed. This is the drug dealer's house, she said. Look at his car, Ravi. She watched Ravi's face as his eyes tracked up and down over the car, from windshield to bumper and headlight to headlight, until they dropped to the license plate. Oh, he said. Pip nodded, staring back at the plate. 009 KKJ. Sal wrote that plate number in the notes on his phone, Pip said, on Wednesday, the 16th of April, at about 7:45 p.m. He must have been suspicious. Maybe he'd heard rumors at school or something. So he followed Andy that evening and must have seen her with Howie and this car, and what she was doing. That's why they were arguing in the days before she went missing, Ravi added. Sal hated drugs, hated them. And when the police asked him about their arguing, Pip continued, he wasn't being evasive to hide his own motive. He was protecting Andy. He didn't think she was dead. He thought she was alive and coming back, and he didn't want to get her in trouble with the police by telling them she was dealing drugs. And the final text he sent her on that Friday night? I'm not talking to you till you've stopped, Ravi quoted. You know, Pip said smiling, your brother has never looked more innocent than right now. Thanks, he returned the smile. You know, I've never said this to a girl before, but I'm glad you came knocking on my door out of the blue to interrogate me. Blood flushed to her cheeks, and she untucked her hair so he wouldn't see. I distinctly remember you telling me to go away, she said. Well, it appears you're hard to get rid of. That I am, she bowed her head. Ready to do some knocking with me? What? He looked at her, appalled. Oh, come on, she said, striding toward Howie's front door. You're finally going to get some action. Gah, so hard not to point out all the innuendos. Wait, Pip, Ravi said, bounding after her. What are you doing? He's not going to talk to us. He will, Pip said, waving her phone above her head. I have leverage. What leverage? Ravi caught up with her just before the front door. She turned and flashed him a scrunched-up, crinkly-eyed smile, and then she took his hand. Before Ravi could take it away, she knocked it 3 times against the door. He widened his eyes in a silent rebuke. They heard shuffling and coughing from inside. A few seconds later, the door was roughly pulled open. Howie stood there, blinking at them. He'd taken off his coat now and was wearing a stained blue t-shirt, his feet bare. He smelled of stale smoke and damp, moldy clothes. Hello, Howie Bowers, Pip said. Please, may we buy some drugs? Who the hell are you? Howie spat. I'm the help person who took these lovely photos earlier tonight, Pip said, scrolling to the pictures of Howie and holding the phone up to face him. She swiped across so he saw the whole range. Interestingly, I know this boy you sold drugs to. His name's Robin. I wonder what would happen if I called his parents right now and told them to search his backpack. I wonder if they'd find a small paper bag of treats. And then I wonder how long it would take for the police to come knocking around here, especially once I give them a call to help them along. She let Howie digest it all, his eyes darting between the phone, Ravi, and Pip. He grunted. "What do you want?" "I want you to invite us in and answer some of our questions," Pip said, glad that Ravi was standing right behind her. She wasn't so scared with him here, his breath warm against her hair. "That's all, and we won't go to the police." "What about?" he said, picking something from his teeth with his fingernails. "About Andy Bell." A look of badly performed confusion spread over Howie's face. "You know, the girl you supplied with drugs to sell to school kids. The same girl who was murdered 5 years ago. Remember her?" Pip said. "Well, if you don't, I'm sure the police will remember." "Fine," Howie said, stepping back over a pile of plastic bags, holding the door open. "You can come in." "Excellent," Pip said, looking back at Ravi over her shoulder. She mouthed, "Leverage," to him, and he rolled his eyes. But as she went to enter the house, Ravi pulled her behind him, crossing the threshold first. He stared Howie down until the man drew back from the door and moved along the tiny corridor. Pip followed Ravi inside, shutting the door behind her. "This way," Howie said gruffly, disappearing into the living room. He fell back into a tatted armchair, an open can of beer waiting for him on the armrest. Ravi stepped over to the sofa and, pushing away a pile of clothes, took the seat opposite Howie, straight-backed and as close to the edge of the couch cushion as it was possible to be. Pip sat beside him, crossing her arms. Howie pointed his beer can at Ravi. "You're the brother of the guy that murdered her." "Allegedly," Pip and Ravi said at the same time. The tension in the room mounted as eye contact shifted between the three of them. "You understand we'll go to the police with these pictures if you don't answer our questions about Andy," Pip said, eyeing the beer, which probably wasn't Howie's first since returning home. "Yes, darling," Howie laughed, a teeth whistle laugh. "You've made that clear enough." "Good," she said. "I'll keep my questions nice and clear, too. When did Andy first start working with you, and how did it come about?" "I don't remember." He took a large glug of beer. "Maybe early 2013, and she was the one that came to me. All I know is I had this ballsy teenager strolling up to me in the parking lot, telling me she could get me more business if I gave her a cut. Said she wanted to make money, and I told her that I had similar interests. Don't know how she found out where I sold." "So you agreed when she offered to help you sell?" "Obviously. She was promising an in with the younger crowd, kids I couldn't really get to. It was a win-win." "And then what happened?" Ravi said. Howie's eyes alighted on Ravi, and Pip felt him tense where their arms almost touched. "We met up and I gave her some ground rules, like about keeping the stash and money hidden, about using codes rather than names. I gave her a phone to use for business stuff, and that was it, really. I sent her out into the big wide world." Howie smiled, his face and stubble unnervingly symmetrical. "Andy had a second phone?" Pip asked. "Yeah, obviously. Couldn't be arranging deals on a phone her parents paid for, could she? I bought her a burner phone, prepaid in cash. 2, actually. I got the second one when the credit on the first ran out. Gave it to her only a few months before she got killed." "Where did Andy keep the drugs before she sold them?" asked Ravi. "That was part of the ground rules." Howie sat back, speaking into his can. "I told her this little business venture would go nowhere if she didn't have somewhere to hide the stash and her second phone without her parents finding it. She assured me she had just the place, and no one else knew about it." "Where was it?" Ravi pressed. He scratched his chin. Think it was some kind of loose floorboard in her wardrobe. She said her parents had no idea it existed, and she was always hiding shit there." "So the phone's probably still hidden in Andy's bedroom?" Pip said. "I don't know. Unless she had it on her when she..." Howie made a gurgling sound as he crossed his fingers sharply across his throat. Pip looked over at Ravi before her next question, a muscle pulsing in his jaw as he ground his teeth, not dropping eyes from Howie, like he thought he could hold him in place with this stare. "Okay," she said, "so which drugs was Andy selling at house parties?" Howie crushed the empty can and threw it onto the floor. "Started with just weed," he said. "By the end, she was selling a load of different things." "She asked which drugs Andy sold," said Ravi. "List them." "Yeah, okay." Howie looked annoyed, sitting up taller and picking at a textured brown stain on his t-shirt. "She sold weed, sometimes ecstasy, methadone, ketamine. She had a couple of regular buyers of Rohypnol." Rehypnol? Pip repeated, unable to hide her shock. You mean roofies? Andy was dealing roofies at school parties? Yeah, they're for chilling out though too, not just what most people think. Did you know who was buying Rehypnol from Andy? She asked. There was this rich kid, I think she said. Dunno. Howie shook his head. A rich kid? Pip's mind immediately drew a picture of him, his angular face and sneering smile, floppy yellow hair. Was this rich kid a blonde guy? Howie looked blankly at her and shrugged. Answer or we go to the police, Ravi said. Yeah, it could have been that blonde guy. Pip cleared her throat to give herself some thinking time. Okay, she said. How often would you and Andy meet? Whenever we needed to, whenever she had orders to collect or cash to give me. I'd say it was probably about once a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. Where did you meet? Ravi asked. At the station, or she sometimes came over here. Were you... Pip paused. Were you and Andy involved romantically? Howie snorted. He sat up suddenly, swatting something near his ear. Fuck no, we weren't. His laughter didn't wholly cover the anger creeping up his neck in red patches. Are you sure about that? Yes, I'm sure. The cover of amusement was cast aside now. Why are you getting defensive then? Pip said. Of course I'm defensive. There's 2 kids in my house, berating me about stuff that happened years ago and threatening to tell the cops. He kicked out at the crumpled beer can on the floor, and it sailed across the room, clattering into the blinds just behind Pip's head. Ravi jumped up from the sofa, stepping in front of her. What are you going to do about it? Howie leered at him, staggering to his feet. You're a fucking joke, man. Alright, everyone, calm down, Pip said, standing up too. We're almost finished here. You just have to answer honestly. Did you have a sexual relationship with... No, I already said no, didn't I? The flush reached his face, peeking out above the line of his beard. She was just business to me, okay? It wasn't any more complicated than that. Where were you the night she was killed? Ravi demanded. I was passed out drunk on that sofa. Do you know who killed her? Said Pip. Yeah, his brother. Howie pointed aggressively at Ravi. Is that what this is? You want to prove your murdering scum brother was innocent? Pip saw Ravi stiffen, folding his hands into fists. Then he caught her eyes and shook the hardness out of his face, tucking his fingers into his pockets. Okay, we're done here, Pip said, laying her hand on Ravi's arm. Let's go. No, I don't think so. In 2 giant leaps, Howie darted over to the door, blocking their way out. Excuse me, Howard, Pip said, her nervousness cooling into fear. No, he laughed, shaking his head. I can't let you leave. Ravi stepped up to him. Move. I did what you asked. Howie turned to Pip. Now you have to delete those pictures of me. Pip relaxed a little. Okay, she said. Yes, that's fair. She held up her phone and showed Howie as she deleted every single picture from the parking lot until she swiped right to a photo of Barney and Josh asleep in the dog bed together. Done. Howie stepped aside and let them pass. Pip pulled open the front door, and she and Ravi stepped outside into the brisk night air, but not before Howie said one last thing. You go around asking dangerous questions, girl. You're going to find some dangerous answers. Ravi yanked the door shut. He waited until the house was at least 20 paces behind them before saying, Well, that was fun. Thanks for the invite to my first blackmailing. Welcome, she said. My first time, too. But it worked. We found out that Andy had a second phone, Howie had complicated feelings for her, and Max Hastings had a taste for Rehypnol. She unlocked her phone. Just recovering those photos in case we need future Howie leverage. Oh, fantastic, he said. Can't wait. Maybe then I can add blackmail as a special skill to my resume. You know you use humor as a defense mechanism when you're tense? Pip smirked at him, letting him through the hedge gap ahead of her. Yeah, and you turned into a smartass. He looked back at her for a long moment, and she broke first. They started laughing, slowly at first, still in shock, and then they couldn't seem to stop. Pip's skin hummed with adrenaline as she fell into Ravi, eyes watering. Her stomach felt tight and sore and something else, a warm, fizzing feeling. The after-laugh sighs only set them off again. Pippa Fitz Amobi, 10/4/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 23. I should really be concentrating on my application. The deadline for early decision is less than a month away. I've already filled in the Common app, letters of recommendation are sorted out, and the Columbia questions look easy enough. It's the personal essay I'm worried about. I've read through the prompts, but I have no idea what to say. The school counselor says to just be yourself, but how am I supposed to explain exactly who I am when I don't actually know? I'm good at homework, I guess, and I'm motivated, but is that what makes me me? I need to focus on something else before I drive myself crazy. So, Howie Bowers doesn't have an alibi for the night Andy disappeared. By his own admission, he was passed out drunk at his house. Without corroboration, this could be a total fabrication. He's an older guy, and Andy could have ruined him by turning him into the police for dealing. His relationship with Andy had criminal foundations, and judging by his defensiveness, possibly some sexual undertones. And her car, the car that police believe was driven with her body in the trunk, was found on his street. I know Max does have an alibi for the night Andy disappeared, the same alibi Sal asked his friends to give him. But Andy's abduction window was between 10:40 p.m. and 12:45 a.m. There is a possibility that Max could have worked with the later end of that time frame. His parents were away, Jake and Sal had left his house, and Millie and Naomi went to sleep in the spare room a bit before 12:30. Max could have left the house at that time without anyone knowing. Maybe Naomi could have too. Or together? Max has a naked picture of a murder victim he claims he was never romantically involved with. He is technically an older guy. He was involved in Andy's drug dealing and regularly bought roofies from her. Rich kid Max Hastings isn't looking so wholesome anymore. Maybe I need to follow this Rohypnol line of intel, see if there is any other evidence of what I'm starting to suspect. Though they are both looking simultaneously suspicious, there's no Max Howie team going on here. Max only bought drugs in Fairview through Andy, and Howie only knew vaguely of Max and his buying habits via Andy. But I think the most important lead is Andy's second burner phone. That's priority number 1. That second phone most likely has all the details of the people she was selling drugs to. Maybe confirmation of the nature of her relationship with Howie. And if Howie wasn't the secret older guy, maybe Andy was using her burner phone to contact this man to keep it secret. The police had Andy's actual phone after they found Sal's body. If there were any evidence of a secret relationship on it, the police would have followed it up. If we find that phone, maybe we find her secret older guy. Maybe we find her killer, and this will all be over. As it stands, there are 3 possible candidates for secret older guy: Max, Howie, or Daniel De Silva. If the burner phone confirms any one of them, I think we'd have enough to go to the police. Or it could be someone we haven't found yet. Someone like Stanley Forbes, maybe? I know there's no direct link between him and Andy, so he doesn't make the POI list. But doesn't it seem a little suspicious that he's the journalist who wrote scathing articles about Andy's killer boyfriend, and now he's dating her little sister, and I saw him giving money to the same drug dealer who supplied Andy? Or are these just coincidences? Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Nat De Silva, Daniel De Silva, Max Hastings, Howie Bowers. Chapter 21. Barney, Barney, Barney plops, Pip sang, both the dog's front paws in her hands as they danced around the dining table. Her mom entered with a dish of roasted potatoes, placing them on a trivet on the table. "Get your brother, Pips?" she said, leaving the room. "Josh, dinner's ready," Pip called. "Well, I could have done that," her mom said, returning with a steaming bowl of broccoli and peas, a small knob of butter melting on top. Pip went to help her dad carry in the plates and the roast chicken, Josh sidling in behind them. "You finish your homework, sweetie?" Pip's mom asked Josh as they all took their seats at the table. Barney's place was on the floor beside Pip, waiting for her to drop bits of food when her parents weren't looking. Josh nodded, already loading up his plate, and she turned to Pip next, her fork pointed at her. "And when's the deadline for sending in your application?" "November 1st, Pip said. "I'm going to try to send it in early, though, maybe end of next week." "Have you started your personal essay yet?" "You want to give yourself plenty of time." "There's still time. And when am I ever not on top of things, Mom?" Pip said, spearing a piece of overgrown broccoli. "If I ever miss a deadline, it will be because the apocalypse has started. Okay, sweetie, just don't spread yourself too thin. Pip's phone chimed loudly from her pocket, making Barney jump and her mom scowl. No phones at the table, she said. Sorry, just putting it on silent. It could very well be the start of one of Kara's lengthy monologues sent line by line, a chaotic scramble of buzzing and dinging. Or maybe it was Ravi. The thought almost made her smile, but she fought it, knowing her dad would ask, "What's so funny?" She pulled out the phone to flick it to silent, looking down at the screen. The blood drained from her face. All the heat rushed down her back, churning in her stomach and pushing her dinner back up. Pip? I have to use the bathroom, she said, jumping up from her chair, with her phone in hand, almost tripping over the dog. She darted from the room and across the hall. Her thick woolen socks slipped out under her on the polished oak and she fell, catching her weight on one elbow. Pippa, her dad called. I'm okay, she said, picking herself up. Just slipped. She shut the bathroom door behind her and locked it. Slamming the toilet lid down, she turned shakily to sit, phone between both hands. She opened the new message. You stupid bitch. Leave this alone while you can. From unknown. Pippa Fitzamobi, 10/7/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 24. I can't sleep. School starts in 5 hours and I can't sleep. There's no part of me that thinks this can be a joke anymore. The note in my sleeping bag, this text, it's real. I've plugged all the leaks in my research since the camping trip. The only people who know what I've discovered are Ravi and those I've interviewed. Yet someone knows I'm getting close, and they're starting to panic. Someone who followed me into the woods. Someone who has my phone number. I tried to message them back. A futile, who is this? It errored, couldn't go through. I've looked it up. There are websites and apps you can use to anonymize texts, so I can't reply or find out who it is. Is this unknown the person who actually murdered Andy Bell? Do they want me to think they can get to me too? I can't go to the police. I don't have enough evidence. All I have are unsworn statements from people who knew different fragments of Andy's secret lives. I have 7 persons of interest, but no one main suspect. There are too many people in Fairview who had motive to kill Andy. I need tangible proof. I need that burner phone. And only then will I leave this alone, unknown. Chapter 22. Why are we here? Ravi asked when he caught sight of her. Shh, Pip hissed, grabbing his coat sleeve to pull him behind the tree. She peeked her head out past the trunk, watching the house across the street. Shouldn't you be at school? He asked. I'm ditching, okay? Pip said. Don't make me feel guiltier than I already do. You've never played hooky before? Only ever missed 4 days of school. Ever. And that was because of chickenpox, she said quietly, her eyes on the large, detached house. The bricks speckled from pale yellow to dark russet and were overrun with ivy that climbed up to the roofline. The driveway was empty, and the large white garage door winked the morning sunshine back at them. It was the last house on the street before the road climbed up to the church. What are we doing here? Ravi said, tucking his head around the other side of the tree to look at Pip. I've been here since just after 8, she said, hardly pausing to breathe. Becca's mom left just as I was arriving. My mom says she works part-time at a non-profit in Norwalk, and Becca left about 20 minutes ago. She's interning at the Fairview Mail office. It's only 9:15 now, so they should both be out for a while, and there's no alarm on the front of the house. Her last words slipped into a yawn. She'd hardly slept last night, waking to stare again at the text from unknown until the words were burned into the underside of her eyelids, haunting her every time she closed her eyes. Pip, Ravi said, tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. He was looking at her in his telling off way already. We're breaking in, she said. We have to find that burner phone. He groaned. It's evidence, Ravi. Actual physical evidence. Proof she was dealing drugs with Howie, and maybe the identity of the secret older guy. If we find it, we can phone an anonymous tip in to the police, and they might reopen the investigation and actually find her killer. Okay, but quick observation, Ravi said, holding up his finger. You're asking me, the brother of the person everyone thinks murdered Andy Bell, to break into the Bell house? Not to mention the amount of trouble I'd be in anyway as a brown guy breaking into a white family's house. Shit, Ravi. Pip stepped back behind her tree, her breath catching in her throat. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking. She really hadn't been thinking. She was so convinced the truth was waiting for them in this house that she hadn't considered Ravi. Of course, he couldn't help her break in. This town already treated him like a criminal, and how much worse would it be for him if they got caught? I'm so sorry, she said again, angry at herself, her stomach twisting in uncomfortable knots. I was being stupid. I know you can't take the same risks I can. I'll go in alone. Maybe you can keep a lookout? He paused. No, he said thoughtfully, fingers burrowing through his hair. If this is how we're going to clear Sal's name, I have to be there. That's worth the risk. I'll probably regret this, but... He paused, flashing her a small smile. We're partners in crime, after all. You sure? Pip shifted, and the strap of her bag fell to the crook of her elbow. I'm sure, he said, reaching out and lifting the strap back up to her shoulder. Okay. Pip turned to survey the empty house. If it's any consolation, I wasn't planning on us getting caught. So what is the plan, he said. Break a window? She gaped at him. No way. I was planning to use a key. We live in Fairview. Everyone has a spare key outside somewhere. Oh, right. Let's go and scope out the target, Sarge. Ravi looked intently at her, pretending to do a complex sequence of military hand gestures. She flicked him to stop. Pip went first, walking briskly across the road and over the front lawn. Thank goodness the Bells lived at the very end of a quiet street. There was no one around. She reached the front door, and Ravi darted across, head down, to join her. They checked under the doormat first, where Pip's family kept their spare key. No luck. Ravi reached up and felt the frame above the front door. He pulled his hand back empty, fingertips covered in dust and grime. Okay, you check that bush, I'll check this one. There was no key beneath either, or hidden around the lanterns or behind the thick ivy. Oh, no way, Ravi said, pointing at the chrome wind chime mounted beside the front door. He snaked his hand through the metal tubes, gritting his teeth when two knocked together. Ravi, she said in an urgent whisper, what are you... He pulled something off the small wooden platform that hung in the middle of the chimes and held it up to her, a key with a little nub of old tape attached. Aha, he said. Student becomes master. I'm coming for your title, Sarge. Sure, Singh. Pip lowered her bag and rustled inside it. What? I don't even want to ask, Ravi laughed, shaking his head as Pip removed bright yellow rubber gloves and put them on. I'm about to commit a crime, she said. I don't want to leave any fingerprints. She held out her fluorescent yellow palm, and Ravi placed the key onto it. There's a pair in here for you, too. She rummaged through the bag and stood up, handing him a set of purple flower-patterned ones. What are these? He asked. My mom's gardening gloves. Look, I didn't have a long time to plan this heist, okay? Clearly, Ravi muttered. They're the bigger pair. Just put them on. Real men wear floral when trespassing, Ravi said, slipping them on and clapping his gloved hands together. They were ready. Pip took a breath, shouldered her bag, and stepped up to the door. Holding her wrist steady with her other hand, she guided the key into the lock and twisted.